physical? The one on the top, the normal, or the repeated hits where you go up and at least you come back down?
There's, people have had a lot of trouble sorting out what the longitudinal physiological pattern is in caregiving. It's one of those things where I think there's a lot of file drawer studies on cortisol and some of the other stuff. It has really inconsistent kind of responses. Even just understanding the emotional distress kind of response is what is unclear as to what the pattern is over time. And this is what people were expecting, that you'd have this kind of chronic stress response. At least a couple of other models are that something like widowhood, that you would get stressed when you realize that you're a caregiver, but over a period, probably a somewhat prolonged period of time, but that once you get the diagnosis set, and once you learn how to do caregiving, your stress level will go back down. Another model is that the one I personally like the best, that doesn't mean it's the right one, is that the most stressful time in caregiving is connected to behavior problems, which tends to be in the middle phases of progressive dementias rather than either the beginning or the end. And so that you might actually get more of a U-shaped pattern where caregiving isn't that bad in the beginning, it gets really bad in the middle, and then once the behavior problems go away because the disease gets worse, it gets better again. Or maybe it builds up over time, and actually like the end phase of caregiving is the hardest where we have more personal care.
And perhaps as far as the caregiving sense of burden, when it's at the later stage of dementia, at least the caregiver sees some end in sight, therefore perhaps their stress level will become lower, as opposed to the middle stages when they're dealing with all these problematic behavioral problems.
I think there's a couple of, my guess is that it's individual. Actually, it's what I think is actually happening with this method. Keeping us from seeing a lot of trends over caregivers over time. One problem is that just like parents raising children, different people find different parts of the process easy and hard, depending on what you yourself have easy and hard times with. The other thing I think is more of a methodological issue is that we don't actually tend, the longitudinal studies just like take people over years of time from whenever the study starts. And all of the people were at different places in the career of actual caregiving. And I don't think I've ever seen a study where they tried to line up people, which would be difficult to do in research like this, because it's not always clear to anybody when the disease started. But they actually try to line people up by where they are in the disease process, rather than where they are in the study year, which is what you would need to do to know this kind of thing. Because it wouldn't be, it's not important when you started the study, because what has that got to do with anything here? It would be like the time. Matthew, did you want to say something?
Just along the lines of what we were just talking about, it seems like you have a combination of different types of reactions at different stages, especially based on the individual ability of the person to either deal with it or not, to different scenarios.
I think especially in aging, like the caregiving it has been to me personally, writing about it and trying to do research on it, an attractive example of a chronic stressor, but it's probably almost like too chronic because it goes on for years and years. Michelle?
I was wondering, do they have like survival now? Do they look at from the death of the person?
Some people have done death of the person backwards. Some people have done death forwards to see what the caregiving career looks like. People have looked at both what happens after placement in an institution and what happens after death. That's a good idea, actually, to do the kind of terminal drug thing and work backwards from. Although the death would not be connected to the disease stage for most patients.
Right. Yeah. It's like very.
You might be able, if you had a big enough starting sample, you might be able to get a clean enough sample of people who died from Alzheimer's.
Something, I don't know if it would be related to like the prolonged response one, but when I was at the caregivers retreat, the older caregivers were more apt to interact, and they were able more so to like go out and do all the fun activities, whereas a lot of the younger caregivers would just stay in the rooms all day. So I don't know if that's because of like the amount of time that they had spent caregiving, and they were able to figure out like when it was time to relax, and they had developed some sort of normal adaptation to it. Because when I talked to one at the conference over the weekend, the Caring for Caregivers conference, and I asked her how she's been since the retreat, and she said, she has her ups and her downs, and that kind of reminds me of, you have your ups and you have your downs.
You know if the younger people are more likely to be children caring for parents?
That was pretty frequent, I think. A lot of them were like mid-20s-ish, early 30s. But I didn't really see them because they spent the entire week, or the 2 days in their rooms.
Well, if they're that young, they haven't developed mature coping skills yet.
Okay.
I'm partly serious, partly not. People's coping skills get better as they age. There really is a reason why you might see older people kind of get better. I was thinking even with older children caring for parents, children and spouses have very different, it's a very different relationship, and they often have very different reactions to the caregiving situation. You get different reads of who handles it worse, but I think spouses often see it as more of a normal part of their relationship, whereas children seem to see it as more of an interruption, and then they have other, they often have spouses or love relationships and kids and other stuff going on.
Jobs.
Or jobs.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you just made that distinction, because I was thinking caregiving really from, well, you could look at those and maybe the spouse is one kind, if one of these children, the children is another. When you talk about physiologic response, would that mean like anxious reaction or a stomachache reaction again? Like they're constantly in this caregiving state, and then, or they're nervous.
Could be any physiological response. What people mostly measure is like heart rate, blood pressure, sometimes galvanic skin response, muscle tension.
I think I'm in the repeated hits category, but not quite that high up, with parental stuff.
This is the one that I find
anxiety up and down.
That people miss all the time, because we're so tuned in from the acute stress model to expecting that the physiological thing is going to be a peak, that the inadequate response, over time you burned out, and so you actually no longer show the physiological response. And this might actually be worse. So you're now just flattened out altogether. Yeah.
Because my aunt lived with my grandfather to be his caregiver. And she would pretty much show what I would call an inadequate response to a lot of the stressors, but she was very calm and methodical. But sometimes she would not be able to deal with it or not be able to push it out in whatever way she was. And then she would show, like an extreme spike in all of her stress levels, like physiological.
I don't know if you'd be able to see this from the outside.
Or just like literally her physiology would almost break down. Like she would not be able to. You know how sometimes if you get into a very stressful situation, you walk up.
Yeah.
She would almost seem externally sound, and then have very spiked moments of even just, I guess, what would you call it? Mental stress, right? I don't know if you'd be able to. I mean, I'm sure it would be testable physiologically, but I don't know if she had physiological stress all the rest of the time, but just kind of suppressed it externally, or if she was just literally able to deal with it and then not at certain points.
Yeah, you'd have to measure this to know, I think. I would be aware of assuming that there's any correspondence between any of these physiological stress models and what you would see behaviorally or in clinical interviews and so forth. If there was, this might look more like exhaustion collapse as opposed to being hyper, but I wouldn't count on that even. I think you could look exhausted and be having this kind of response too. You might be hyper and show this. It's really kind of a burnout thing. This is what I find that people just don't think about.